Thank you, Brother Tommy, for being on the channel with me. Wanted to just kind of talk to you a little bit. You're a pastor locally here in Fairview, North Carolina.
Correct, right outside of Asheville.
Okay, right outside of Asheville. We're in Asheville, North Carolina. And just tell me a little bit about you. Are you married? Your family?
Yep, married. Almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years this October. Got 4 beautiful children, one in heaven. Ages range from 8 years old to now a little bit less. I believe it's almost 10 months now. So.
Also, you have a little one.
Little. Yeah, so excited. He's pretty awesome.
Great. Okay. Good deal. So tell me a little bit about you before becoming a first-time pastor. Is this something that you've always wanted to do? Have you always been in ministry?
Well, as a matter of fact, honestly, I never seen myself as a pastor. I had the
seen yourself as a
never
pastor?
seen myself as a pastor. I had the rare opportunity to be behind I believe one of the greatest men that ever walked the earth, Brother Lee Davis, and had a good opportunity to see, just a personal glimpse into the life that they had, him pastoring a church here in Asheville. And so, not that it was awful or that there was a bunch of stuff that went on. I mean, you got to understand there's things that a lot of people don't see from the perspective of the pastor. A lot of people, they have one pastor, but the pastor has multiple church members. And so...
So it sounds like you were kind of steered away from pastoring.
In a sense, maybe. I realized that what he dealt with, I didn't know. It wasn't that I was steered away from it. It was I didn't know if I had the ability to handle it. Knowing who I was and knowing how I dealt with things. But as the years have gone on, I've realized that, age helps out a lot with that. So gotten to the point where, I'm more patient than I used to be. As a young preacher, that, young preachers they'll say whatever and they've got a fire on them and it's great. But at the same time, once things progress, you kind of grow up, you get some wisdom, you deal with things differently. And so I never seen myself as a pastor, but what I did prior to becoming a pastor was I preached out of my church for years, did some evangelism work, was able to go and preach locally here around Asheville and in North Carolina.
So you're accustomed to preaching.
Accustomed to preaching, yeah.
When did God call you to preach?
God called me to preach in October of, I believe it was 1997 or 98. I can't remember now, but was saved in October 16th of 1997. And so it was a couple years after I gotten saved that God called me to preach.
Okay. All right. So you've done some evangelism, revivals, things like that. And I think you sing.
Yep. Sang, had the opportunity when I first started singing, as a matter of fact, started singing with you and Buddy Jonathan, and
that was way back when.
That was the beginning of the singing. We were able to sing and travel around just a little bit here and there or in town. Then from there, things kind of branched out a little bit. Started singing a little bit with a pastor out of Burnsville, Brother David Shelton. He is now in South Carolina, Gateway Baptist Church, and so I sang with him for 4 years. We did one CD, and then shortly after that, we stopped singing with them. Just the Lord kind of progressed and moved me away, and so started singing with Breaking Ground and sang with them for 14 years. And Bluegrass Gospel, Lord allowed us to travel all over the Southeast.
Now, Breaking Ground is Brother Davis's, the late Lee Davis's son, daughter-in-law,
and me.
And you.
Yeah, and then the daughter-in-law's brother. So you had Jonathan and Kelsey, and then myself, and then Jay Schuler, which was Kelsey's brother. And to begin with, Matthew Davis, which was Jonathan's brother.
Okay.
And then we also had one young man, Stephen Adcock. He played the guitar for us for a little stretch there in the beginning. So that's where it started.
I remember Stephen.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've been in church pretty much your whole
Pretty much
life.
my whole life, yeah.
Just never dreamed you'd become a pastor.
Never dreamed I'd become a pastor. Like I said, had the opportunity to preach all over the country, especially with Breaking Ground. Lord really opened up a lot of doors. And it was actually through that door that the Lord opened for us to be able to go into multiple churches. I got to see a lot of different aspects of different churches. You know, you kind of call, some people have little sectors or groups that they kind of hang out with. We got the opportunity to go around to all the groups. And,
you got to see it all.
I got to see it all. And so you had some people that, you know, they all believed right, but, you know, they you just get into a kind of a routine of, you know, hanging out with the same churches. And so we went as far north as New Jersey. I had a church up there, Solid Rock Baptist Church. They allowed us to go in, you know, 3 or 4 years, and they flew us up there to sing. Went as far east as Mexico, Missouri. As a matter of fact, you went with me on that trip.
Oh, yeah, wow. I
and
remember that.
Yep, so that was a long drive.
That was the Sherathon.
Yeah, over there. Yeah, Brother Kevin Weber had a radio station up there. And far south is Pensacola, Florida. Eufaula, Alabama, all that. So we traveled quite a bit, but mainly through North Carolina, Tennessee, Georgia, South Carolina.
Right,
Yep.
okay. All right, so you're the pastor of Pleasant Grove Baptist Church. You're a first-time pastor. This is your first church.
Yep.
Hopefully the only church, I'm assuming?
I am hoping the only church. I've told them many times that I have no plan on leaving.
They might see
They
this.
may see this. So if they ever plan on getting rid of me, they're going to have to kick me out. So I really do love that church. I really do.
Okay, well, good deal. So tell me a little bit of what it was like leading up to becoming the pastor of that church.
Right.
Maybe you know, how you were introduced to these folks at this church, and,
Gotcha.
and how it become to you.
So
pastor.
I was introduced to them. As a matter of fact, I was in the process. Me and my family were looking for a church to join, and we had kind of. Lord had moved us in a different direction, and we were looking for a church. And so in the process of looking for a church, I will say I filled in at another church here in Asheville for about a year. It was a Nanda Baptist church, and they were without a pastor. And so they asked me to come in, fill in. I knew that I didn't have liberty to be there. And so what I did was I told them, I said, you know, we're looking for a church at this time. I said, you know, while you're without a pastor, I'm more than happy to help you out and you know, fill in as much as they would want me to. So they asked me technically to interim pastor for just a little while, and so I did that. And so in a sense, kind of got my feet wet. After that, the Lord brought in another young preacher into the church just as visiting, and he knew me, I knew him very well, Caleb Curtis, and he ended up taking the church after I had left shortly after that. So I believe God kind of designed that. So leading up to it,
you were just there at Ananda as a help.
As a help, yeah.
I'm sure you
I literally at that point I still had no real desire to pastor, but it was the seed that God used to start growing that in my heart. And so I
wonder if David had the desire to fight a giant.
I don't know.
You know.
Yeah.
But he faced that bear.
Exactly.
He faced the lion.
And prepared him for that.
So maybe that was one of your lions?
Maybe so. Maybe
You know.
so. Very good analogy there. I like that. So story goes on. I ended up after that. A good friend of mine, Josh Boyd, he had told me about a church in Fairview, North Carolina that he was going to. He really enjoyed, and they at the time, unfortunately, were without a pastor, and so he told them about me. And so they called and asked if I could fill in. So I did, filled in a couple times here and there over the course of a couple months. And shortly after that, Lord, I believe, kind of opened a door for me to go do something to make me realize the importance of what I had. So I wouldn't necessarily call it a mistake. I would say that God allowed me to see the other side of life. I got a job opportunity. I took it. Involved some traveling, and so I told the church that, you know, when they had called to ask me to fill in, hey, I got another job, I wouldn't be able to do that service, and so they had ended up not calling me again. And so
now this is the church that you're pastoring.
This is the church that I was pastoring now, that I am now. And so funny story is I was at that job for about 2 months, and so found out very quickly that that was not where I needed to be. Maybe in part the Lord allowed me to, in a sense, maybe mess up a little bit taking that job, but the Lord used that to allow me to realize where I needed to be. And so on the way back, the day that I left that job, on the way back, the Lord burdened my heart for those people. And kind of funny story, I don't even know if I've told you this yet, but so on the way back, I kind of argued with the Lord a little bit because the Lord felt like the Lord wanted me to call one of the deacons there and just let them know that I loved them and that I was praying for them. And I said, Lord, if I did that, especially in the situation that I'm in right now, it would seem like I was gunning for that church. And I said, I don't know that that's necessarily a good idea. And so for about
you argued with the Lord
for about an hour. I battled that. I fought that. I'm not doing that. I can't do that. That's going to look awful. And so ended up, I gave way to the Lord. I really believe that He intended on me to do that. So I called one of the deacons. And I told him, I said, hey, how you doing? We conversated, just called up real quick. And I told him, I said, I just wanted to call and let you know that the Lord had you guys on my heart, and I love you, and I was praying for you. And he said, well, thank you, brother. That means so much. He made the statement. He said, I wish you could come preach for us. He said, we really enjoyed having you. And I said, I really enjoyed being there. And I said, if I can be a help, then feel free to let me know. And he said, but I thought you had a job that you couldn't. And I said, well, as a matter of fact, I am leaving that job. And my fears actually came to fruition right there. And I said, I'm actually leaving that job right now. Today was my last day.
On second thought.
Yes. So he said, wow, that's a real blessing. What I didn't know on the flip side of that was they had just gotten to the point where they could not find anybody to fill in for them. And they didn't tell me that until long, long after. And so they said, well, hey, would you mind to come in and fill in for us this Sunday? And I said, I would be honored to. And so it kind of stemmed right there. That was the growth of it. From that point, I began to fill in on a regular basis, week in, week out, for about 2 months.
Now, this was with the intention of maybe becoming the pastor. It wasn't like Ananda where you're there to help.
This was a non-spoken intention. I knew that they were wanting me to kind of candidate for pastor, and they knew that I was looking. We talked about it just a little bit after the fact, and they knew that we had decided that we knew where God wanted each other, and so it was kind of amazing in the fact that God had prepared their hearts for me, and God had prepared my heart for them, and so. I've got a little quick story here I'll tell you here in just a minute, but finishing up that portion of it, so as time rolled on, the church had promised another preacher they wanted him to come preach for a 2-week span. And so he came in and preached, and the church looked at the deacons, and the majority of the church pretty much looked at him and said, we really would love to have Brother Tommy back. And so nothing about the other preacher that came in to fill it in. They just promised him that they wanted him to come preach, and they'd give him those dates. And so they wanted to fulfill that promise. Well, from that point, it was about 2 to 3 weeks that they had begun to talk to me. Hey, are you interested? Met with the deacons, met with some of the church members, and I told them, I said, yes, I am. I said, I would love to have kind of a one-on-one with me and the church. And them ask me any question they had, and me to tell them what I believe in. That way, we all know what we're getting into. And so that ended up happening. And so from there, it was pretty much history. So
okay, so you've been introduced to this church by Josh Boyd. I know Brother Josh.
Yeah.
Good guy. He introduces you to the church, and through a series of events, you're kind of going away, and then you come back, and then it's like the Lord kind of meshes a mess into something workable.
Yes.
It sounds like what you're saying.
It was straight up biscuits.
Biscuits.
I mean, everything looks messy at the beginning, but man, once it's done, it's incredible.
Done, it's good.
So
that's a great analogy. Okay, moving on. So tell me about your first service. You've been voted in as pastor.
Yep.
Now it's your responsibility. it was before, but
Yep.
now officially it's your responsibility
Yep.
to feed this flock of God.
Scared absolutely to
What's
death.
going through your mind?
Just fear, just straight up fear.
Okay.
I enjoy preaching. I love preaching. It's one of the biggest passions of my life. And I always wanted to be known as a preacher, not a singer. And so for 18, 20 years, I sang most of the time. And so I was known as Tommy the singer. And so I really wanted to be known as a preacher of the gospel and me to be recognized as that, not for pride's sake, but just because I wanted to preach more than anything else. And so my first service there at the church, I was scared absolutely to death because now it really came to full circle in the fact that I am the under shepherd and these are the sheep and I'm leading these people, and it became a great awakening really in my heart, because I got to the point where I realized, you know what, my spirituality and my relationship with God is going to be very dependent on what these people are being fed.
Yeah.
And the responsibility there, needless to say, it was very heavy. Very heavy. I had gotten to the point where I had, I believe, been prepared for many, many years prior to this. Even though I didn't have, this was the story I was in reference to, even though I didn't have any desire to be a pastor, through watching my pastor and seeing what he went through, I realized that a lot of the things that I've seen him go through, God was now allowing me to go through. Right. And so I wasn't going in blind. I had some great advice that was ringing in the back of my head from great men of God that God allowed to place in my heart and in my life, great friends. And so I walked into this fully aware of what I was getting into. And I wasn't trying to run from it, but at the same time, it was a scary situation. So once I came into the first service and we got in there and I started preaching, I'm going to be honest with you, 100%, I felt like home. Felt like this is exactly where God wants me. And there was such a peace.
And that's in the first service, or
first service?
Oh, okay.
First service.
So from fear to foundation.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It was almost honestly truly like that. So from the time that I started preaching, the full weight of what I was stepping into hit me like a ton of bricks. Mm-hmm. During the message, God began to work in my heart, literally during the message, and I was just preaching an encouraging message. I can't even remember. I should have wrote down my first message, but I didn't. It's mantra of my life. I fail to do that kind of stuff all the time. But honestly, by the middle and to the end of the message, there was such a peace and a foundation that I believe the Lord had laid in my heart. I told them very shortly after that very statement I told you, that I had no plans on going anywhere else. Love them people.
Great. That is great. So, everything's just wonderful that you've told me so far. You invited me tonight to be on a Facebook Live broadcast for your Wednesday night Bible study / prayer meeting. And we just finished that up, just
moments ago.
20 minutes ago. The reason that you're doing that with your church, it's April the 8th of 2020. COVID-19, the coronavirus, has become a worldwide pandemic.
Yep.
The United States is basically in a stay-at-home quarantine mandate, which means, and we say that when we're at church, but as you notice in the background, we are the only ones here.
Yep.
And it's been this way for 4 weeks that the churches have been empty. Now, a lot of churches are doing like you're doing this Sunday for Easter Sunday, doing a drive-up service where they are driving up in their cars. I'm assuming just outside on the patio of the church there.
Porch steps there.
You're preaching probably with a sound system. So it's going to be public, kind of out in open air. And to be within the rules of the mandate by the governor of North Carolina, we're in North Carolina, they have to stay in their cars.
Yep.
And so it is serious.
Yeah.
Thousands of people have died. Thousands upon thousands of people have contracted this virus. And it has a high survival rate, but the ones that are dying have a compromised immune system, or they are elderly and have a weak immune system.
Some underlying problem, yeah.
Underlying problems, things like that. So with that being said, we just did your online service. You've been doing online services for a couple of weeks.
Yep.
How long have you been pastoring? So when did you take Pleasant Grove as pastor?
July of this year would be a year. And so that would be a full year that I'd been pastoring. So it's not been very long that I had been voted in as pastor. But I had been there already over a year because it was April that I had started to fill in for them.
So you've filled in since April.
Yeah.
So you're basically right at the year
Right at the
point
year
of
mark,
them listening to you preach.
Day or Sunday and Wednesdays, every service, yeah.
So, and now they can't meet in the building.
Yep.
And you're having to resort to online like just pretty much everybody is. So I guess my next question that I think the audience would be interested in is how has that affected your church? Not you, but how has that affected your church?
Tremendously. Our church was established in 1891, so it's over 100 years old. And not only that, but it's been in the same building for over, I believe, 60 years. And so they've had 3 different structures on the property there. And so a lot of the people that are in the church, the majority of them grew up in the church. A lot of them are family, as a lot of mountain churches are, but they're very close knit. Sure. I mean, this church, unlike any other church I've ever really been a part of, they genuinely love everyone. There has not been, that I'm aware of, one spat or one frustration that has become public or been some kind of big ordeal since I've been there. And
Wow.
That's the whole time. There's been nothing. They genuinely love everybody.
How many attending members do you have?
Attending, we've got about Sunday
An
mornings. We
average.
run about 70 or so.
Okay.
We've got over 100 on the books, but you know how things go. You got people with jobs, you got people with sicknesses, vacations, different things that a lot of people just can't be there. It seems like all at the same time. But that being said, they're very close, and they've welcomed me and my family in just phenomenally. And so as far as how COVID-19 has affected the church, it's really stressing on the church a lot because they're very used to seeing each other multiple times a week. One thing I say about church members, a lot of times we're more close than we are our immediate. I mean, you're my cousin. We don't get to see each other as much as we'd like to, but I get to see my church people every week.
Yeah, three times
Religiously,
Yeah,
pun intended.
Right.
So, so we get to the point where now we don't get to see each other hardly at all, and especially when you have the older population that this is a scare for them to even show up. I'm sure after all the mandates and the regulations fall off, there's still going to be a fear about if they're going to try to show up or not. And so, we never had live stream before. Not what necessarily the church didn't want to do it. It just wasn't a thought because we always had the ability to go. Sure. And now there's kind of a rush, just like in multiple churches across the country, that they're rushing to try to get something in there to try to help and feed their church. So it's affected them quite a bit.
Yeah. I know several churches that have been non-existent in the internet world are now there. They're doing the best that they can. A lot of cell phone videos. Yeah. A lot of churches have had the means to invest in good cameras, things like that, and to get online. I will say this, just a little interjection here. I know we're talking about you, but I have seen more gospel messages preached online since this COVID-19 outbreak than I have. In my opinion, since social media was a thing.
I agree, and we made a statement earlier in our broadcast for church that there is such a potential for revival in this situation like I've never seen in my life if we would just grab onto it and run with it. So it's incredible.
This is the time to seek the Lord for sure. So let me get just personal with you. It's stressful in the church. It's affected the church. They're close knit now. They're separated.
Yeah.
How, being a first time pastor, technically in your first year, how has this affected you? Let's talk about how it's affected you spiritually, but then let's talk about how it's affected you mentally.
So I'll start with mentally, because mentally I've had to change gears, so to speak. It's like trying to take a car from automatic to manual.
That makes sense.
It's so different because I'm used to preparing for church, getting songs ready, getting a format. I don't like there to be dead space in church, and so making sure the piano's playing when it needs to, and not necessarily that I'm in control of all that. We set things in place, and so we kind of go in with a sense of normalcy, and you get used to the routine. Not saying that God can't change that routine at any moment during a service, but you're comfortable in your church. You know what's coming up most of the time.
Well, you're the overseer.
Exactly. And so I had just gotten to the point where there was a comfortableness in the way the service was going to go. I wasn't forgetting stuff, to, hey, whose birthday's been this week or whatever. And so then all of a sudden I had to change focus mentally. And for instance, tonight, us doing the services here at a different church, just because of just the mere fact of having better Wi-Fi signal.
That was a 2 hour. I mean, we had 2 hours to make this. 2 hours. To make this happen. When we actually talked about it, and made this decision.
Exactly, and so you have to switch gears into the effect that we're no longer going to a church house, standing up together, singing congregationals, preaching, and then going home. Now you've got people that are trying to plan to make sure they're there at home at time, and we've got church members that. One person will log on and they'll sit around their TV and they'll all watch the service together. And so we're losing that togetherness, I guess you'd say, in the fact that everybody's there together. But at the same time, I feel like it's really, we're realizing what we had and what we're missing.
Makes you grateful.
Makes you grateful.
So we've got about 2 minutes and 15 seconds left. How are you going to go from here on out? I mean, what's going to happen from here?
The plan is hopefully COVID-19 will subside and we'll be able to get back to a normal.
Okay, if that doesn't happen.
If it doesn't happen, we're making preparations to make sure that we have live stream videos options. We're going to plan on potentially trying to go and maybe let somebody go to individuals' houses that can't or don't have internet, and go to their houses and try to be a blessing to them some way there, whether it be, not necessarily technically going inside, but on their front porch, just witnessing to them.
We're dropping off audio CDs of our recorded services.
Yeah, that's another plan there too. We've got some people that don't even have a CD player, that we're taking them CD players to give them those audio messages. So
there's an outreach of the gospel that's happening because of this that is just absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And to be a first-time pastor and to stay at it and stay with your church, I commend you.
Thank you.
And I think God is pleased with what you are doing.
It's all Him, brother.
And I think that your testimony as a first-time pastor can be an encouragement to people that might see this video. I'm Brother Jeremy Jones. Thank you for tuning into the channel. This is Brother Tommy Lanning, pastor of the Pleasant Grove Baptist Church in Fairview, North Carolina. If you don't have a church to go to, I go to Temple Baptist Church in Asheville, North Carolina. He's the pastor of Pleasant Grove in Fairview, North Carolina. Come visit us. Thank you for tuning in. God bless you.